We are wrapping up the end of section 7 in this video, so you're going to use this outline to fill in information that comes from the recorded PowerPoint. So once we get finished filling this in, we are done with section 7 and we'll be ready to move on to Roman numeral 8. When the Dutch began to settle in and around the area where present-day New York is, we know it was just a matter of time before they would come into contact with the Native American Indian groups that were located there. Well, with some of the tensions between the natives and the Dutch decided to come up with a solution. So they built a wall to separate themselves from the Native American Indians in the area. Now today, if you were to go to New York, you would not see that wall because many years ago it was torn down, but there is, of course, an area of New York that you can go to see where the wall once stood, and that is where we get Wall Street. So if you go to New York today and you walk along Wall Street, which is the financial center of the city, you know, where the stock exchange is, the stock market, that is where the wall once stood. And so that's why that street is named Wall Street. So make sure you're putting this down on your outline underneath number 16, where I gave you a little bit of room. Well, eventually, the Native Americans in that particular area, they were known as the Manhattan Indian Tribe. Of course, that's where we get the city of Manhattan from. They are going to negotiate to sell this land to the Dutch. And so if you look at your 16A, it says the Dutch purchased land from the Manhattan Indian Tribe. And what it boiled down to was the natives are going to sell this land to the Dutch, or if you want to say they had a trade negotiation going on with the Dutch for basically a basket of goods that would amount in today's world to just $26. So think about what the Dutch have just accomplished. They have pulled off one of the greatest land sales in history. Okay, one of the greatest land purchases in history by trading with the Manhattan Indian Tribe a basket full of goods that apparently meant a lot to the natives. It was very valuable to them, but those goods in today's world would cost $26. So this was a steal of a deal. The natives got robbed. I mean, the way we look at it, they did, because the Dutch pretty much stole that land. Because you go to New York today and that land, where Manhattan is worth millions. I mean, you can't even buy real estate for under $1 million in Manhattan. So that just shows you how valuable that land is even today. So now that the Dutch have this land in their possession, they are going to name it, and this is on your little B, New Netherlands. Because think about where they came up with that. They are from the Netherlands, the Dutch are, and this is new land, so it's a new Netherlands to them. Their capital city will be named New Amsterdam, because again, the capital of Netherlands is Amsterdam, so this is a new Amsterdam, a new city for them. So make sure you also add that to your little B. We then come to the leader of this Dutch colony by the name of Peter Stuyvesant. And I'm going to say this a couple times to make sure that you get the correct information on your outline. So I want you to write down that he is the Dutch governor of the New Netherlands. He was a very effective ruler, which means he was very harsh, very mean. People did exactly what he said. They knew not to double-cross Stuyvesant because he meant business. So again, he is the Dutch governor of the New Netherlands, and he was a very effective ruler. You can also put that his nickname was Old Silver. Now, you don't have to write down how he got the nickname, but in case you're curious, he lost one of his legs in a previous battle, and to replace that leg, he was given a wooden peg leg. And that wooden leg has these silver bands wrapped around it to keep it in place. So they called him Old Silver for that reason, the Dutch settlers did. And you knew when he was around because you could hear him walking towards you with that wooden leg, and boy, you would make sure you were doing everything right if he was nearby. Because again, this guy didn't mess around. So this is Peter Stuyvesant, the Dutch governor of the New Netherlands. Moving on to your number 17, you will see that in the year 1664, the English were settling in the area of where the Dutch were, and clearly there's going to be some tensions between the English and the Dutch. So this tells us that the Dutch were there first, and then here come the English settlers by 1664 in the area of where New York is today, that the Dutch called New Netherlands, and the English will successfully drive out the Dutch. The Dutch just were not as strong as the English, and they got removed from that area. So the English now have that land, New Netherlands, but they're not going to keep that name because they want something that's going to represent the English and where they're from. So what the English do, and you've got some space under number 17 to write this, they rename New Netherlands to New York. They wanted to honor the king's brother, who was the Duke of York. So that's why this new land that England is claiming will be named New York. Of course, we know that that city, New Amsterdam, will also see a name change by the English. The name New Amsterdam will be completely redone to be called New York City. So instead of New Amsterdam, when the Dutch had it, it will now be renamed New York City by the English, since they are now in control of that area. So the last information on your Roman numeral 7 deals with number 18. There are some islands that I want to go over with you that all three groups of people, the Dutch, the French, and the English, will each have control, which means they each establish colonies in these areas. So if you look at your number 18, it says islands in the Caribbean were colonized by, let's start with the Dutch. They are going to colonize the island of Aruba, which is already typed for you. The island of Haiti was colonized by the French. And then the island of Jamaica was colonized by the English. So again, all three of these groups of people, the Dutch, the French, and the English, at one time they were looking for the Northwest Passage, and they are going to colonize some of these Caribbean islands. Well, what for? Obviously, it's to grow sugar and cotton. So there will be a number of sugar and cotton plantations that will be established within these islands because we know that the Caribbean islands is the perfect environment to grow sugar and cotton. They don't have the space back in the Netherlands, France, and England to grow all of these products, much less the climate where these crops could grow. So not only are the Caribbean islands, they've got the perfect climate and temperatures, but they've also got the space for large amounts of these crops to be grown. We know that for the French in particular, they, if you remember, started making a lot of good money over in the New World from the fur trading business. However, you see here, eventually the French give up that fur trading business because they were making more money off of sugar. Sugar proved to be more profitable. So you can make sure you have that written down on the little b so you know why they switched from fur trading to growing sugar and selling that. And we know that sugar was being grown in the West Indies. So I'm about to cut over to my map to make sure y'all understand the difference between the West Indies, where we find a lot of sugar being grown, versus the East Indies, where you have a lot of the spices. So I don't want you to get the two confused. So when we're looking for the location of the West Indies, you're here in these Caribbean islands. So right in here is what we refer to as the West Indies, and this area is known for a lot of sugar being grown. Versus over here, you have the East Indies. So again, if you go south and east of Asia, you will find the location of the East Indies, which is known for spices. Okay, so when you're studying West Indies versus East Indies, please don't get the two confused. So this wraps up the end of section 7, and we are ready to move on to Roman numeral 8, and that will be in your next video.